Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today is 8/8 Lionsgate Portal, and last night I uploaded my channeling from or with Dolores Cannon, and then I went and meditated with um, my spirit guides and called in Jim Mars. Now, a lot of people don't know who Jim Mars is, especially younger people, but he was definitely a trendsetter and a world renowned journalist in his day. And God rest his soul, he hasn't been gone that long, actually. He only died a couple years ago. But he was a journalist and an investigator, much like George Knapp, who um, almost accidentally stumbled into learning about various different conspiracies and how they were connected to UFOs, or what we call UAPs these days. Um, Now, Jim was never the type to, change the term just because everybody else did. So he still called them UFOs, even though we call them UAPs and NHI now. He may have used the term NHI. I don't know for sure. But when I channeled him, he looked just as cute as he always did. His, full gray beard and um, adorable round face, and his glasses on, and his fedora, and his cheap blazer. You know, um, I love that look on him. And if I could have found my fedora, I would have wore it today for my video, just in honor of him. Um, when I first began channeling him, and I could see him coming in, I was already thinking about who else I want to channel after him. And I was thinking to myself, as I waited for him, that I would like to channel JFK Jr. to see if he would come through also. And interestingly enough, Jackie Onassis Kennedy showed up really quickly. Like, she faded in and she said to me, John's not here yet. And then she faded back out as Jim Mars stepped forward to speak to me. Now, Jim started talking so quickly that all I had time to do was jot that down on the top of my notes as Jim was talking to me. So that's exactly what I jotted down, that she faded in and she said, John's not here yet. And then she left. I didn't have time to really process that and think about it at the time. But I feel like that means that he's not on that side yet, that he hasn't crossed over. So I'm going to be delving into that to find out more. But in the meantime, I'm going to share with you what I channeled from Jim, which is super informative and very in depth. Showed me a lot about who I am and who my father truly was, and the connections with a lot of the conspiracy theories and UFOs. So we're going to begin with that. Okay. So right out the gate, Jim starts saying to me that socialism is the true game and always has been, even with the UFO cover up. He says the Nazis were ahead of us, and when we found out, we conceded to helping them escape if we could get their secrets and um, be able to communicate with ETs that they were communicating with. Um, he said we had the damn blueprint, but we couldn't figure out how to make them work. I think he was meaning the blueprint for the UFOs, how to build them. And I do remember William Tompkins telling about how he was one of them in World War II who helped to create the blueprints. Well, they stole blueprints from uh, the Nazis, and then to help create the ships. but they couldn't figure out the propulsion system for him. Okay, let me back up. So he says, we had the damn blueprints, but we couldn't figure out how to make them work because it's mostly or most often by thought. They took all of our tax money for hokey smoky projects like rockets and nuclear fusion, when behind the scenes we had anti-gravitical propulsion and cold fission right after World War II. And then he goes on to say, and he was very much in his character, right? So he's like, see, them aliens gave the Nazis the same stuff Tesla had. And the US didn't like that. So greed of power sold us out to socialism on the game, socialism on the game um, thereof that's in play now and coming to a head. Okay, let me back up because, like, I'm trying to read my own writing. I was writing very fast as he was channeling and speaking to me. He says the US didn't like that, so greed of power sold us out to socialism or the game thereof that's in play right now and is coming to a head. Many are watching, and he showed me alien beings that are watching and people here on the planet. Many are watching to see what choices y'all make. That decides whether we rise or fall. And he showed me that he meant in consciousness. He says even the damn Chinese and Russians are in on it. So don't let them fool you. And actually, he said, don't let them fool you. I was trying to write it, as true to form for how I was hearing him speak to me with his slang and stuff. So he says that even the Chinese and the Russians are in on it, and Germany and America, all of the top countries. And then he went on to start talking to me about my father. He said, your dad was part of their covert operations to collect the data. The narrative or the con was to claim that there's no military experience, no records that could be found, medical or otherwise, multiple aliases, most likely teeth implants from a lot of the super soldiers. And he said, yes, your dad had them too. And I feel like my dad did have them. So that's why he confirmed to me, because I was already thinking about my dad telling me how he could pick up radio signals and stuff. He could hear transmissions from the uh, implants and the metal in his teeth, right? Um, the wife will also confirm, or ex-wife rather, will confirm that there was no military experience or involvement. The ex-wife will confirm there are no medical records. There will be false honor, which basically is like a free pass from the police officers or FBI or whoever. You get respect from the police and other people of authority, regardless of your crime. There are no charges, regardless if it's police or FBI. It just never happened. And then he says to me, sound familiar? Yeah, sounds familiar. Sounds like a lot of what we're learning now about the way things go down in the government, right? So this was going on even back when my dad was involved with all of this. He said the pros of it are that in reality, they're actually high ranking officers in either the Navy, the Merchant Marines, or the Coast Guard, something that's got to do with the waterways. And he said, or even all three. Um, he said they went black in the 70s, meaning like my dad and people who went to work for these covert operations, they would go black in the 70s. And then by the 80s, all of their medical records and military records and everything would be completely expunged and erased to where no one could find record of them. And excuse me, um, I can actually vouch for that as well, because no one in our family, I'm the baby of 7 kids, nobody in our family ever thought that our dad had anything to do with the military, yet he would bark orders at us. He treated us like he was a drill sergeant. He taught us to make our bed so tight and taut that you could bounce the quarter off of it, and he would test that. Um, he was very, very strict. And anytime he was passed out from drinking, he was barking orders in his sleep like he was some kind of a commander, you know. Now, granted, he was captains on the river boats. That's what we knew. He was a captain on the river boats. But this was like barking serious orders, um, and being really strict with his boys that were under him. And I always felt like he was military. You know, it never made sense to me that he was so strict and he could teach us to make our bed so tight and taut, and we had to be fully dressed to come to the breakfast table and set very perfectly straight. And, you know, it's like he was raising little soldiers, right? So I never understood how he would behave that way or why if he was never in the military. Well, when he passed away, I was the only one of his children that was still under the age of 18. So all of his paperwork was sent to me, and I received certificates and documents from, I don't know where, I don't even know why they sent them to me, that said that he was in the Merchant Marines, that said that he was a captain in the Coast Guard, like diplomas and certificates and different things. Like, how did this stuff suddenly show up, and why did they send it to me? Well, I mean, they sent it to me because I was the only minor. Um, but that's so strange to me that we never knew. And I asked my mom about it, and she claimed she never knew. Um, and and yet she would remember things like, I mean, like we remembered, going to the airport to pick my dad up from being on a red eye, and 2 men in suits with a briefcase handcuffed to them would walk him to the car and then pass off the briefcase. Like, she never asked about those things, you know, she never inquired about them, or so she claimed, and she says that she knows nothing about it. So whether she did or she didn't, we certainly never understood what was going on, my brother and we were the only ones that witnessed it, because we were the only ones still living at home in the late 70s and early 80s when my dad was part of these covert projects. So I thought that was really interesting that Jim helped me to clear that up. Now, on with the pros. So another pro is that they can fake their own death at any time. And that too actually happened with my dad, in 1983, after we had moved to Indiana from Arkansas. My dad got left behind because my parents were divorced, and someone from in our town phoned my mother and said that dad's name was in the obituaries and that he had died in a car wreck. But he was very much still alive, because he was up here. He had shown up where we moved to and surprised us. So he had faked his own death in Arkansas, but was still alive in Indiana. Go figure. I don't know how that works out, but I know that that's something that happened with him. So also another pro is that your ex-wife will continue to cover for you, and that you will have some type of medical condition that was from being in the military, that will create a disability, so that you can claim your disability by a certain age. Um, he said a lot of times there's also military medals or uniforms that are naval ordered and connected to the ones who work with the waterways. So again, the Merchant Marines, the Coast Guard, the Navy, stuff like that. These are people that would report to the high up authorities, probably in Washington, or even the UN, to provide briefings. And I actually have memories of my dad taking me with him to Washington, D.C., and leaving me in the car out front while he walked inside of um, the White House or the Capitol building. So interesting there, because I never understood why I would have those memories. They also have a history of family in the military. Excuse me, usually with top secret clearances and signed NDAs, right? Where you don't disclose what you've experienced. And my father would personally confess to me I was a small child, so I guess he felt like I was the only person he could tell, because what's a little kid going to say? But he would confess things to me and say, if you all only knew what I really had to do, you wouldn't love me, And of course, I would tell him, "Oh, Daddy, I'll love you no matter what you've done. You're still my dad," right? Which is true, because love surpasses everything. But my dad didn't understand that. He didn't feel like he deserved that. Um, but these NDAs and these top secret clearances are all connected to covert operations, for ETs, craft retrieval, data collection. And he said, then the data collection is regardless of the nature of it, because it's all part of the big game, even though these men and women don't really know why they're doing some assignments or to what means necessarily. So the people that are being commissioned to do these covert operations don't even understand why they're doing them, was what he's saying. Everything else was very compartmentalized to prevent anyone from telling their plan. So even if, like, say my dad was part of some data collection, excuse me, my kids and I have been a little bit sick. Um, he wouldn't necessarily know what they're doing with the data collection once he turns it over. Like, he's not so far in the loop, right, that he would know how far all this goes, is what Jim was showing me. And so he was saying, because of it being kept so compartmentalized and so secretive, that this in and of itself is socialism, complete dominance and control. And then he says, I like Trump. This is looking good now. And that's all I'm going to share for now on that. Then he says, next time we talk, we'll talk about Earth history. So he was already giving me his bona fide stamp of approval that he'll speak with me more. Next time we'll talk about Earth history. But know this, the government knows, even Trump. The Vatican knows, famous authors know, including sci-fi authors, and have known, because they are great researchers and true journalists, not like these flunkies nowadays. Every aspect of society, the world over, these people in authority all know the plan. And some of each have been trying to tell us this all along, including my dad, he said. You don't think it's an accident you are who you are, do you? And you can remote view it all because you're clairvoyant. So that comes natural to you because you understand that everything is energy. You're good at this. Some just have it more naturally, and you're one of them. And part of the reason for that is who your dad was. Some is your bloodline, and that too also goes back to your dad because you chose your dad, and of course, who your mom's family is. So he was showing me it was connected on both sides. He says, we work just like a computer or AI, but more advanced, and sparks of energy that connects everything for collective consciousness. And I think my notes might have gotten mixed up a little bit here. Yeah, because I think that goes next. He says, thought is faster than all of it and overrides the rules. And I understand that too, he said. He says, oh, and by the way, the Galactic Federation is very real. You're not crazy, though some who get a lot of attention on this subject are crazy or flat out full of shit. And that's exactly how he worded it to me. Um, he says, like that April girl. Well, I know exactly who he's talking about, but I'm not going to comment on that. He says, giants too. Giants are another thing that we'll talk about some other time that are very much real. He says, now, but back to remote viewing. This is by far the best way to travel to other places. And that's the best way to get the data to take back. Now, hold on, let me understand what he's saying here in what I wrote. To other places, and there's lots of data to back it up as real. Okay. He says there's all sorts of cities on other planets and civilizations of beings, many kinds of beings, and we get them here too. Sometimes people even mistake them and their presence for ghosts. He says, now I know Dolores has already spoke to you about the black-eyed people, and that's a perfect example of what I'm saying here. Ghosts tend to look like they have black eyes and are white or translucent, but so do the tall whites. They have black eyes. Black-eyed people, they have that cloaking ability, if you will. And he says, and come on, even the grays have solid black eyes and can render themselves or their craft invisible or translucent. We just have to think outside the box more often than not. Uh, he says hospitals and old folks' homes, for example, always have these ghost stories. And ghosts or not, it's all connected. And then he was showing me how even the old people, he called them old folks, even the old folks still get taken from time to time. And so there's going to be activity that seems like paranormal activity there, but it's not always from ghosts. Sometimes it's from ET. And I found that to be very interesting because that's not really something I would have ever considered. So that was very, very interesting to me. He says, especially if we talk about orbs. He says, you see orbs with ghosts and you see them with ET. He said, hell, even Bigfoot. And the kicker here is that ET can be a ghost too. Just like you one day and me right now. Them EMP detectors, they pick up ghosts and they pick up ET, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah. He says, because they're both in that form of energy. Humans and ET can be in that energy, dead or alive. Both. He says, oh, yeah, that's a real WTF moment right there, ain't it? And he literally said that. He says, now you think about everything I've just told you and figure out what you should do with it. And as far as even the conversation we're having right now, I'm essentially a ghost. And much like me, you too have been fortunate to have multiple experiences on this journey. And it should be shared. Just like my journey is still continuing, I'm still fortunate enough to be having experiences, just like talking to you. And now you need to share that, what I have to say, because I didn't get to say it all yet. And I know even more now than I did before. One thing, what he says, one more thing I want people to understand, that you talking to me is proof that we all have to do, that all we have to do, excuse me, I can't read my own writing, I was writing it so fast, is be willing to plug into the collective information. This ain't magic, he says. This ain't magic. So the point of what he was saying there is that we can all channel, we can all connect with the collective consciousness, we can all connect with the mainframe. And more of that information actually came through later on. I'm not sure if it was Jim Mars still telling me or what, but probably 15 minutes after I stopped this conversation, this transmission, whatever you want to call it, with him, a whole lot of other information came through that I wrote down as well. So I'm going to share that with you also. But I have a little bit more here from Jim Mars. He started showing me how there's these things that look like diamonds all around our planet, and they're about this big, and they're just kind of fixed in a position, an orbital position around our planet outside of it. Okay. And yes, it was round for all you flat earthers. It was round. And he says they have these, he called them grenade size, but from what I was seeing, they looked this big. Now, a great grenade would only be like that big. To me, they looked this big. But this was his words. They have these grenade size, fauceted, shiny things glued in our outer atmosphere called buckyballs that creates a force field to keep us from going off planet to other planets. This is part of our quarantine because we, so that we don't F stuff up, is how he put it. We're not conscious enough yet to be responsible with going to other planets. And then he showed me nuclear facilities and nuclear weapons and stuff where, that's a big threat still. And that's something we have to get past before we can get to travel out there, I guess. You get me a little more coffee. Thank you. So, okay, these things are called buckyballs, and they create a force field to keep us from going off planet to other planets as part of our quarantine so that we don't F stuff up. We're not conscious enough yet, he says. And then he says, thank you. Titan 4, all the way to Tesla's works and Elon Musk's rockets will blow up after they get so far out. He says, now satellites or probes or drones, that's a whole different story because they don't need the same uh, propulsion system. So they're allowed to get further, because I was actually asking in my mind, well, how do we have these probes out there then that can see Mars and see Jupiter and see all this stuff and see the sun and all these things if we have this barrier? Because it didn't make sense to me what he was showing me. And I'm like, so how do we have those things? And so that's when he said they're different because they have a different propulsion system. They're not trying to break the sound barrier to get out there to their destination. Wink, wink. Now, ask yourself, how do you get allowed to pass the barrier? He says it's simple. We raise our consciousness, but in turn, it allows for new sciences to be taken more seriously. Anti-gravitic is great, but powering things is with thought. That's where it's at. Thought and pure intent is how we get past this barrier. It doesn't take breaking the sound barrier or going fast as the speed of light. It surpasses those basic physics with quantum physics when you learn to apply them. And he says this is what Einstein's spooky matter was all about. And that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. Um, because I'm a science geek myself, and this spooky matter business, dark matter, that's where the real magic happens in creation. And so all the rest of the stuff that I had channeled actually covered a lot of that kind of stuff, and where humans are going with the metaphysical and with um, life in general and science. So stay tuned for that, because that'll be the next segment. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please leave a like, comment. I love to hear your comments. I reply to every single one of them. And please share this video far and wide, and let's get the messages out there so that we can all get a clearer picture of what the hell is really going on, as Jim Mars would say. And until next time, be well and be blessed, and love and light. See you soon.